and thy desire shall be for thy husband. In Genesis chapter 3, verse 16, God explains what happened as a result of Eve's choice. He explains that in regard to Eve, there are now two problems: definition and disorder. God says because of what she did, things would now be different than they were before. Instead of being confident in her dominion of womanhood, having fulfillment in her divine purpose, she is now stripped of her confidence. Whereas she was once secure in her God-given identity as a counterpart to man, standing in dominion facing him, now she would have a desire, a longing, a stretching out, and a searching for someone or something. This longing or desire or stretching out after is unfulfilled by her husband. The word husband in this verse is ish, I-Y-S-H. It's number 376 in the Hebrew and Chaldee dictionary, pronounced ish. Not just referring to Adam as her husband, but her fellow man. In other words, this verse does not necessarily mean she will have a longing for a man or for her husband, but she will have a longing for identification, role definition, or position with an individual or with mankind in general, because she is now naked and ashamed. She is no longer confident in who God created her to be in her bare and naked form. It does not mean she will now desire her husband as a member of the opposite sex and remain unfulfilled, but rather she will now desire identification, intimacy, definition, and purpose to define who she really is. And if it takes sex to get that identification and purpose, she will do whatever it takes in order to get her physical, mental, and emotional needs met. When I was in college, we studied a philosopher, Abraham Maslow, who describes the needs of human beings. These needs range from the need for safety and security to belongingness, he said, and various other levels, all the way up to what is called the need for self-actualization, which represents the highest, most sophisticated form of need in Abraham Maslow's view. Maslow said that self-actualization is the point we get to in life when we say, wow, I'm satisfied fully with who I am. Most people, he said, never reach self-actualization. I believe the scripture in Genesis 3:16 describes the need women have for self-actualization, the desires that a woman has to have a meaningful relationships, not only with her husband, but also with others, and the desire to be fulfilled in every area of her life. I believe that God was explaining that need to the woman, and it is the same thing that Maslow described in his hierarchy of human needs. God declares that the woman's desire would be for her husband, and he shall have rule over her. This simply means that the mutual understanding and harmonious agreement that they once had was now filled with conflict, misunderstanding, misinterpretation, physical and emotional stress and pain. In other words, there's going to be issues because the two of them, the man and the woman, only knew good before, but now they knew evil and good together, which would only bring about conflict. This disharmony created by the introduction of sin in the life of the woman would include the physical pain and emotional sorrow in childbearing and childbirth as well. Add to that the issues of self-esteem and belongingness, self-confidence and worth, and what do you have? Discord in the relationship she had now with her husband. Mind you, not only was Adam her husband, he was also the only man alive. He was mankind. That meant the discord not only extended to how Eve would view Adam and relate to him as her husband, but also the discord would extend to how she would view him as mankind. Therefore, the desire that God spoke of did not just refer to a woman's feelings for emotional gratification and desire for a husband, though it could very well impact those things. I believe clearly God was speaking beyond the context of husband and wife relationships, because not all women are mothers and not all women are wives. Neither do they all desire to be, and that's perfectly okay. But what God was saying to Eve was that she, as a woman now, has to live with the lie that she believed from the enemy. The same lie that got her thinking that she was not like God in the first place was now the lie that she had to live with, because that's what she was deceived to believe. She now had what she believed about herself. Why? Because she was given dominion over what she believed, and that is how she chose to use her dominion. She would struggle now with the truth that declared she was fearfully and wonderfully made. Now she is a prisoner to the lie that she is not who and what God says she was. So all she has to compare herself with is she's standing around in this creation that God has created in the garden. She's standing, comparing herself now here with who's standing in front of her? But this man. And that's now the standard by which she is identifying herself. Not God, but man. So she's searching out man, trying to find definition. And that definition is not necessarily in sex, though this does, I'm sure, have great impact upon sex with her husband. I believe after the fall, sex for her started in her mind, with Adam helping her to feel good about herself again and who she was created to be, I believe. It was not God's best for them, but it was what they both had ordained through their own dominion. I submit to you that after Eve sinned, she went into a state of fear, a state of depression over her actions, her identity, and her worth. First, they hid after they committed the sin. People only hide when they are afraid or feel inferior. Secondly, in regard to Eve, after God dealt with her sin, the next time the Bible records Eve says something was related to her words. The next time the Bible records Eve's words were related to her disposition. Let's examine that. Okay, so after they sinned and they were sent out of the garden, right? Adam and Eve began to have children. The Bible records that Eve says in Genesis chapter 4, verse 1, I've gotten a man from the Lord. Notice Eve didn't say, I now have a son. I have a baby boy. She says, I have a man, as in fellow man. You would think that if God called you mother of all living, you would connect to that purpose. You might say, oh my God, I now have a son from God. Or, oh wow, we have a baby boy. But no, Eve didn't say that. Even then, I believe that Eve was yearning, searching, grabbing, and reaching out for definition and purpose in her fellow man, just as God said would happen in Genesis 3:16. What does this say about the importance of your self-esteem, your self-confidence, and your self-worth originating from and being rooted and grounded in what God declares.